Good evening, everyone. How are you? All right. Thank you, thank you. It's good to be home. I'm so excited to be here, and especially with this book, Nephew. Has anyone had a chance to read it yet? Okay. All right. The first page. It's fascinating. I think you gotta. So let me get the preliminaries out of the way. MK Asante is an award-winning filmmaker, recording artist, distinguished professor, and best-selling author of Buck, a Memoir. He studied at SOAS University in London and earned a BA from Lafayette College and an MFA from UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. Asante has lectured at Harvard, Yale, and the British Library and is a professor at Morgan State University, where he is the recipient of the Distinguished Achievement Award. For more information, go to www. No, but you'll find it. It's at the back of your book, and make sure you get one. Please give a warm DMV welcome to MK Asante.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
All right, honored to have you. We originally started talking to MK about coming here with the Baldwin series. And why would we be interested in having you come with this book during James Baldwin's 100th year?
I think the I think the reason why is because I chose to write an epistolary memoir. You know, I wanted to write a letter to my nephew because there's so much that I wanted to tell him. And at the time when I wanted to tell him, you know, he was shot. He'd been shot 9 times. He was in a coma. And so there's so much that I wanted to tell my nephew, and there was a sense of urgency. And I think me choosing the epistolary format, you know, writing a letter to him gave, you know, it was really a nod in terms of the most effective time I had ever seen that done was with Baldwin and The Fire Next Time, and the letter to his nephew on the emancipation. So that, to me, I think that was why people made that connection, and also what was, you know, an obvious inspiration for me as well, to choose that format, you know, because whenever you have a project like this, it's really like choosing a format or you know, a vehicle to how you're going to deliver this message. You know, you know you have the message, you know you have this story that you want to tell, but what's the vehicle? You know what I mean? And so good to see y'all. You know, so whenever you come to events, sometimes you see family and friends and people you haven't seen in a long time, and I haven't seen these two. I used to change these diapers back in the day, you know? So when I look, I'm seeing them all big and grown, and I'm so proud of my niece and nephew. So
Awesome.
this is another niece and nephew I have. You
Awesome.
know, you know, in the
Welcome.
Black community, we got a lot of nieces and nephews.
Yes.
You know how it is. So, but that's definitely, I'm so happy to see y'all.
All right. Well, speaking of you know, family members and so many nieces and nephews, what I thought this was so one of the reasons why I love this book so much is it gave a nod to those Black men who stand in the gap until the father gets himself together. You know, there's always that family member that kind of looks out for everyone, and you know, your brother was having some issues. And so you had no problem. And to you, it probably wasn't a, let me stand in the gap. You just did what you needed to do. Can you talk about that position right there, being uncle, and what that means in our community?
Yeah, I will. And I'll also say, you know, this was a unique situation that I was in. I mean, we're all in unique situations. I feel like I was in an extra unique situation because, you know, my brother and my nephew had never met, but I was close with both of them. So it's kind of a very interesting situation. Furthermore, they both were rappers, right? And they both are MCs and very skilled and talented. Furthermore, they both record music at the same place. Furthermore, that place is my studio, Wonderful Sound Studios. So here, my nephew is 18 years old, never met his dad, ever. Yet, that's my brother, and we're super close. So, and I'm close with both of them. But at some point, it starts to get very tricky for me. You know what I mean? To be close to two people like that. And then as a father myself, you know, I think before I had children, I saw the situation in one way. But then after I had children of my own, it's like, it was very difficult for me to maintain that strong relationship with my brother. And I felt almost like I had to make a choice, you know?
Got it.
And they're both so prophetic. And they, you know, what's so special about these two is they weave, like any good MC, they weave their story and their narrative in their rhymes. You know what I mean? And it's deep and prophetic. And so that's one of the things that I do in the book is I also weave their lyrics throughout the book, and it always kind of highlights what's going on in the book. I'll just give you an example, you know, of just kind of the prophetic nature of some of their lyrics, as well as the, you know, the commentary on their lives. You know, my nephew has a song where he says, you know, I'm trying to hustle, trying to get $1. I'm from the trenches, I ain't never have a father. So, you know, he's talking about being from the trenches, never having a father. My brother, for example, has a line where he says, you know, spent my best years doing time, optimist, no father figures, so the bullets, they be popping us. I mean, it's so deep because he wrote that before my nephew got shot.
Right.
So it's like he already understands what it is. No father figures, so the bullets, they be popping us. And so he already understands. And then, so I say that to say because another element I talk about in the book is manifestation and how language and words can be used to manifest whatever. You know, I use examples, whether it's Nipsey Hussle or Pac or Biggie, of talking about early death and just how that manifests and just the connection between what we say and what we speak and what happens, you know. I love those brothers that I just mentioned. And throughout my life, I've seen the manifestation of death and destruction. So, you know, that's one of the things that I try to warn my nephew about in the memoir.
Okay, so set the stage for us, because, you know, there are a lot of places we can go. But let's, for those who, without giving too much away, can you set the stage for what the novel is about, like, and how we split into, we'll get to the four-part harmony, but what is the catalyst? Like, what happened?
Yeah, the catalyst is my nephew being shot. I'll actually read you. Somebody said they read the first page, so I'll share with you the first page, because, or the first couple, or whatever, just to kind of get into it. Dear nephew, it's 3 a.m. My veiny hands shake like leaves as I write you. You're unconscious in the ICU at Temple University Hospital. Rain streams outside, tears inside. The sky is off black. The clouds are thick like blunt smoke, and the air is hot and heavy with pain. Shots, screams, moans, blood, piss, smoke, cries, prayers. I can smell the stress. You are nowhere near alone. I'm in the ER with your mom, cousin, Crystal, Big T, Bump, Grandma Beverly, and what feels like half of North Philly. Mounds of cheekbones, crescent lips, and scripture tattoos. I read only God can judge me on Bump's brick of a forearm. Your principal from the Crefeld School, George, is here too. Heartbroken and steely-eyed, he palms his forehead in utter shock and disbelief. Detectives in blue jackets peek, prod, and circle like clocks. White coats with clipboards scramble in and out. Temple police and neon windbreakers stalk the hallways. Nurses whoosh by, scrub striding in urgent purpose. Bloody sneaker prints stamp the hallway vinyl. They don't let any of us go back to the trauma bays, not even your weeping mom. She snaps at the staff. I need to see him, she pleads with the front desk. She wears cornrows and an oversized black t-shirt that says, no excuses. The O is a weight plate and the X are two crisscross barbells. The lady at the desk places a hand over her heart and shakes her head with sympathy. Her voice stern, her gaze gentle but on point. I'm sorry, ma'am. Really? Y'all not gonna let me go back there and see my son? Her thunderous mama bear voice cracks in heartbreak. Security surrounds the desk. Nikki, you gotta let them do their job, Crystal says to your mom, rubbing her shoulders to calm her. Your mom is what my mom, your grandmother, she prefers Ina, which is Swahili for grandmother, calls a textured woman. Ina describes a textured woman as a woman with her hair plaited and then unplaited with the ripples remaining as she sashays from corner to throne. Ina, who's just getting out of the hospital herself, wishes she could be here with you, but her illness, MSA, multiple systems atrophy, makes it too painful for her to travel. She says after a life devoted to dance and movement that she can't count on her body anymore. I'm leaning over the edge of this dingy hospital chair, repeating the same thing under my heavy breath. Fight, fight. I accidentally bite my bottom lip because I say fight with a hard, violent F. Every time I say fight, T adds, rumble that, nephew. Fight, I can taste my blood. Rumble that, nephew. Fight, rumble that, nephew. T saying rumble that takes me back to freshman year. Anyway, that's the opening two pages or so. I go into, in that section, I decided I wanted to just talk about it a little bit to give you more context. But I go into, you ask what the book is about. The book is really about a family. And it's a very vulnerable book in the way that it's written, because one of the things that I started doing in my memoirs, Buck was my first memoir, and in that book, I did something that I felt really organic to the way I wanted to tell the story, and that was I used hip-hop lyrics as well throughout the book. I called it like hip-hop Tourette's because they were just kind of random. And then I used my mom's journal, like her actual diary entries, in the book. And I used my brother's prison letters, he was incarcerated, in the book. And I interwove them throughout the narrative with my voice. And I chose to use a first-person present tense voice, and I did that same thing with Nephew. And in Nephew, it picks up on the story of Buck, my first memoir, but now we're further along. My first memoir, Buck, which ends in around the year 2000, is about me growing up in Philly, navigating, family life, streets, all these kind of things, school, education, getting kicked out of different schools, having a hard time finding my way, and ultimately finding my way, finding my purpose. So that's Buck. Now, me and my brother's relationship, Uzi, is heavily written about in Buck. We're super close. He's my superhero. I try to be like him. Just to give you an example of how I try to be like my brother. He's 6'6", so I'm clearly not. If you saw me walking, I'm not 6'6". So my brother's mad tall, and when he used to walk under like the doorway, he would always duck. And imagine me, I'm like 7 years younger than him. I would go under the doorway and I would duck, you know what I mean? And I still don't need to duck.
Right.
Yeah, but I did that when I was a kid because I wanted to be just like him. And so it's really interesting to see the progression, because now in this new book, Nephew, it's about my nephew who's my brother's son, right? Mm-hmm. And you learn so much about my brother's journey and me and his journey in Buck. And so now in Nephew, you're learning about his son, my nephew, who he doesn't know, but who is shot and who needs to understand how we got here. And there's so many things that I realized that I didn't tell my nephew about our family, our life, who he is, even as a black man in this country. And so I decided that I was gonna lay it all out. And it's a when I say it's a complicated family of story, like I said, I mentioned the thing about my brother, and my mom was also very close to my nephew. But this is the story of so many people, just I think similar to Buck. You know, my mom's journal is also in this book as well. You know, so similar to Buck, now we have new entries that are about things that are going on, and she's always commenting on what's going on, and she struggled with her own mental health issues, which she's written about very openly. You know, the reason why I did it, just so you understand this, is I was talking to my mom about her journal entries, because I used to read them when I was a kid. There was a point where me and my mom didn't talk a lot. Like, we didn't say a lot to each other. She was kind of having issues, and I was having issues, and nobody was talking to each other. But I would sneak and read her journal. And that was very insightful to me. I learned all types of stuff about back in the day, in the 60s and 70s, all types of stuff. So it was great for me to read that and to connect with her. And so when I was talking to my mom about it, she was like, you know, and let me just back up real quick, tell you real quick about my mom, little anecdote. My mom, who passed away in 2021, was a genius. She really was a certified genius. She was a choreographer, internationally renowned. I was born in Zimbabwe. I'm an African American, but I was born in Zimbabwe because my mom was the director of the first national dance company of Zimbabwe. She created a dance technique, Pan-African, called Mafundala, which is taught all over the world. She did the New York Times crossword puzzle every day and killed it. Then she was in the New York Times. You know, they did an obituary on her. She would have been very happy about that, because she read 4 newspapers every day. Every day. Every day. She read the New York Times, New York Post, Philadelphia Daily News, Philadelphia Inquirer. Every day she read that. So that's my mom. She was a professor of dance and aesthetics. She loved the way black people did everything. It doesn't matter what it is, the way we walk, the way we talk. In fact, my mom never cursed. I never heard my mom really curse at anybody, anything like that. But this is what my mom would say to me. She would say, sweetheart, you know I don't curse, but I just love the way that black people say motherfucker. You know, I just love it, you know, because we can say motherfucker,
Right.
motherfucker, and motherfucker, that motherfucker. And she would go on, and, you know, and it's true. It's
Right.
it's art. It's artful, you know. There's an artistry there, you know, and you know, so she would just go on, and that's who my mom was. She would take all of that culture, like jump rope, for example, double dutch, and she would elevate that to sacred status in her art. It was very beautiful. So I wanted to tell my mom's story in this book as well, and I do. And her story is in her. Some of those journal entries are in here. She's now talking about what's going on, you know, in with this new story. And so she gives a lot of insight. And the other journal entry that's new, something that's really new that I did in this book, because I wanted to understand, you know, one of the themes in this book is, you know, my brother, we told him for years and years and years, from the moment his son was born, you gotta be in your son's life. You know, we tried everything, all these different things, and I talk about it a bit in the book, and we never really were seeming to connect, you know, and it made me think a lot about my brother's story, because you know, we always just call each other brothers, but, you know, we don't have the same dad. And I started to think about his story, and specifically about a man named Bob, who I only knew from my brother and my mom. My mom said that was, you know, her previous, that was my brother's father, and that he was abusive and things of that nature. And but my brother's story of him was like always like kind of like a hero type, you know. He was always like painted him like real heroic, you know. And over the years, I found out the truth about, you know, Bob and just why he wasn't, you know. And my mom told me before she passed, you know, she said she loved him. One of the things she loved about him was he used to carry the New York Times. He was this tall black man in the 70s, you know, and he used to walk across the campus of University of Buffalo with the New York Times under his arm, you know, and he was a basketball player. And she loved, like I said, if you were into cultural events or current events, she fell in love with this guy, and he was a genius. It's my brother's dad. He was a genius, just like my brother's a genius. My brother's a certified genius. And he wrote in 1972, he started writing a series of letters to God. Bob did. These are the most brutal, deep, letters dealing with drugs and addiction that I've ever come across. Bob was at the height of his heroin addiction when he started writing these letters. He was 25 years old. I'll give you an example of one of his letters just so you can kind of get a sense of flavor for him. So again, this is interspersed throughout the book. The way I like to think of the books, you know, that I do is kind of like layered. You know, if you think about music or film, which I'm also in those fields, there's always layers, right? So you think about like a song, it's got all different types of instruments going on at the same time, and there's different things happening, right? And then, but it's still progressing. But the layers are very important, right? If you took out the drums or took out the piano or whatever, it would change it. And then sometimes those elements aren't always constant. They appear and then they, you know. And so that I'm giving you the music metaphor. Like I said, I'm you know, heavily involved with music. It's also part of what I do. And so this book is called Nephew, a memoir in 4-part harmony, because I began to think about the voices, my voice, my brother's voice, which is in here, my mother's voice, and Bob's voice, my nephew's grandfather, who he also doesn't know. I began to think about these voices as a harmony, and as part of a, you know, something that was harmonic and something that was had a synchronicity to it, but also was really represented different times, but was connective. So, for example, Bob talked about getting high on Jefferson Street in Buffalo, right? My brother talked about getting high on J Street in Philly, right? J Street is Jefferson Street in Philly. And then I started to hear my nephew talk about popping pills and stuff like that in his music. And so the drug thing became a very important aspect to tackle in this book. You know, Bob wrote about the things that he did on heroin. He stole from my mom. He abused from my mom. My mom would have a dance show in Buffalo, where she would invite the community and raise money, and they would do this dance show, and the whole community would come out. And then they would go celebrate, and she would take the dancers out. And while she was doing that, he writes about robbing her house, right? This is her man, her boyfriend, you know, and he's doing it. Why? Because every day he wakes up, one purpose, get high. That's it. And so, and the thing that hit me as I was working on this book, because Bob is writing about the 70s, and what I love about him is because he's writing to God, there's a brutal honesty. You know, you can't hide from God. You know, you can't bullshit God, right? Like, God already knows what you're really doing, so all you could do is be honest and be vulnerable. And so there's an honesty in what he's saying is so deep, and I really feel like it was so anti-drug. Like, if you even think about doing heroin, just read this. He says, I'm 25 years old, and my penis is a non-functioning instrument. Right. Like, it's just not a part of it. You know, what 25-year-old wants to read that? And, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you know what I mean? So that changes the game, you know? The other thing is that, like I said, that really hit me was he was doing all that for heroin. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger than heroin. So that's what we're dealing with now.
Right. Did you know about the letters when you first thought of the concept of the book? Did you know about Bob's letters?
No, it developed. Yeah, it developed shortly before my mom passed. She told me about the letters.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it feels like, as you read this book, that you are willing your nephew to live through a song, and everyone's story comes in as part of this harmony of this song of all four of you willing him to live and giving him a sense of identity, which it seems that he was a little lost, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think part of the identity is how can you know who you are when you don't know who you are?
Right.
Meaning, it's my job as an uncle, like, did you tell him about, you know what I mean, George Moses Horton, the poet from North Carolina who bought his own freedom through his own books and was enslaved and
you
then
do a lot
moved
of teaching
to
in here too.
Philadelphia and Liberia. Did you tell him about that? Did you tell him about Fela? Or did you tell him about the Zimbabwe liberation movement? Did you tell him about Nzinga? Did you tell him about his ancestors? If you didn't tell him, how you gonna criticize him? Right. And the thing is, you know, I think there's just a sense of responsibility. So how could he know if we don't tell him? And I think there was a period of my life where I avoided talking to him about this, about his dad, about, you know, he would even ask me questions like, do you know my dad? Mm-hmm. I'm like, your dad, like, in my mind, I'm like, yo, first of all, your dad lives 10 minutes away from you. You don't even know that, but he lives down the street. And in so many levels, your dad was so instrumental to me. Of course I know him. That's my big bro. That was my hero, you know. And I talk about in this book, you know, how it goes from someone who you kind of see in this way, right, to someone who you don't see in that way anymore, and that's always pretty tough, you know,
right.
Because of the decisions that we make. However, I will say, and this is what I love about the book and what I love about writing and life in general, is the story is never over till it's over. So even with my brother and all this stuff, because we always told my brother, it's never too late, it's never too late, never too late. Mm-hmm. I got a homie, my homie John, one of my best friends. I've known this dude since we were in kindergarten. It's crazy. And, because, you know, I'm in my 40s, you know, that's a long time. Kindergarten, you know? Mm-hmm. So John, growing up, he never knew his father. Like, the whole time, never, middle school, high school, never knew his father. So when John was like, I guess in his mid-20s, early 30s, that's when he first met his father. Now, me and John are the same age. Him and his dad, almost every day, are locked in. They're like best friends. They have this relationship, and it's really deep, and you can't change what happened, or it doesn't mean it's gonna be, just everything's gonna be cool, and you know what I mean? But I guess the idea that it's never too late, you know, it's never too late to at least, and again, it doesn't, without that sense of like false expectation, like, it's been 20 years, I'm gonna reach out and everything's gonna be cool. Like, no, it's probably not gonna be cool, but it's the beginning of something, and you have to do that. And so in this book, I'm really pleased to say that there is a redemptive value. I mean, I'll just tell you, I mean, because you still have to see how we get there. You know, my brother, first of all, my nephew survived. So my nephew's alive and he's doing well, and he's been at different book events with me and book signings, and you know, he was. I never let anybody read my memoirs before I publish them. I never do that. Mm-hmm. Never. People always ask me, can I see it? Like when I was doing Buck. Mm-hmm. You know, your family is the ones, they want to read it because they want to get the jump on what you're going to be saying about it.
Right.
So my family was like, read that, John.
And your dad is who, by the way?
My dad is Dr. Nephew Asante, you know, is Dr. Nephew Asante. So they're all saying, hey, can I read it, you know? And I'm saying, nah, you just got to wait till it comes out. So that's how I usually am. They got to read it when everybody else reads it. Because, you know, if you let people read it, you know, they want you to change all types of stuff.
Yeah.
They say, look, hold up now.
You talked about that?
Yeah, it's like, damn. Yeah. Well, by the time it actually came out, it'd be some whitewash, just, you know, everything was hunky-dory, you know? Right. So, no, but, you know, so I never let anybody read it. However, for the first time ever, I let my nephew read this book before it came out, and I said, Neph, you know what I mean? If you don't want this, you know, he was like, nah, I love it, it's cool. But that was the first time I'd ever let someone read something before it was out. Not just read it, but knowing that whatever, if he was like, I'm not cool with this or I'm not cool with that, then I would respect that. You know what I mean?
What can you tell us about family secrets? And yes, we understand, especially in our culture, secrets, but those secrets for those being raised by you, like your parents or whatever, they want to hide these secrets from you. But as we grow older, we just want to understand the why. We're not judging you about you doing what you had to do at the time, but they hold this why with shame. But if we could only understand, you would only tell us why so we can understand and then maybe understand ourselves a little better. There was a lot of that in your book. And what can you tell us about your experience with your family and writing this and secrets coming out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually looking for this. It's so hard sometimes to find, what you're looking for but there's a passage where I talk about secrets specifically, and that's what I was trying to find, because it is an important part of, our story and particularly this story. But I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it, so I'll just tell you.
Okay.
Hold on, give me one more shot here.
By the way, you're going to find in these stories a part of your family, and you will identify so much within this book. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that happened with, that's uncle this, and it was very healing. And at the time when I was reading the book, my brother had come to visit me. I'll just filling in some air while you're looking. Had come to visit me and went into cardiac arrest from Canada. He just came and his heart stopped working. So I'm reading this book and I'm watching different people concerned over my brother come together. I'm watching people who haven't spoken in years come together. So I'm reading this book and it's so deeply personal. So just saying that, you'll find a lot that you can identify with because it's so raw. And that's one of the beautiful parts of this book.
Yeah, so I still didn't find it. Thank you.
You found it?
I didn't find it.
Okay.
But I talk about secrets and about how they are detrimental because they keep you from knowing who you really are. Family secrets and things of that nature. And they also prevent you from being preventative. Like if you don't know that your grandfather was a heroin addict, right? Then you don't know that you might have a predisposition to certain things. So these are not helpful to keep a secret. We need to know, that's what happened to him? Okay, let me, so I talk about that. I talk about letters braided into our family history. I was just reading, like Senegalese two-strand twist. I talk about that in the book because it's braided in, my mom, Bob, my brother's writings and his letters from jail, my sister, her writings are in there in Buck, all of these letters, my grandmother, her letter. Mm-hmm. When Bob was in jail, my grandmother wrote him a letter. So her letter is in this book. Part of what I do as a writer is like, I remember as a filmmaker, I've worked, I did a movie with Maya Angelou called The Black Candle. And when we did that film, rest in peace, Dr. Maya Angelou, when we did that film, it was the first time I got a chance to work with an archivist. And when I worked with an archivist, I was like, damn, I could do this in another life. Like, just be in the archives all day. I really love just dealing with history and historical documents. And so part of what I do in the way that I approach my memoirs is very much, reliant on those archival materials and discovery and finding those pieces and putting them together like a quilt. And I use the quilt as a metaphor in this book.
So you talk about the rest of your family being genius, sir. The way you put this book together, I just want to talk a little bit about your process. I was just trying to move it out of the camera a little bit. So, what comes first? Because, you're saying that, you didn't have your nephew's grandfather's letters before. What's the first thought when you're saying, okay, I'm going to write a book? Because you discovered some of these writings as you were going through the process. So what is your process? You first say, I'm going to write a book about this. And then how did all of this come together?
Thank you. That's a great question. I do love talking about writing and the process because even as a writer, you know, there's sometimes a magical mysticism to it. Sometimes there's and sometimes it can be really clear, you know, as well. Like my dad you asked who my dad is. My dad he was the founder of the first PhD program in African American Studies. He's an Afrocentrist. He's the author of over 100 books. You heard that right. 100. That's a crazy number.
Yeah. And he's still writing.
Yeah, and these are 100 books that other people publish, you know, because I guess you could publish, you know, your own books, but these are books that he put out, you know, over 100 books. He's 82 years old. He's still a professor at Temple University. And so when you ask him, Dad, give me some advice, you know, about writing. This was a long time ago when I wanted to write my first book. He said, you want to be a writer? Sit your ass down and write.
All right.
And that might sound like some real simple mathematics. That's some calculus right there. Sitting your ass down and writing is one of the hardest things to do.
Right.
Like, that is the hard part. Like, we got all these ideas. We got so many things we want to do. But literally, it's to sitting your ass down and write. And there's no way around it, really. Because I've tried, you know. I've thought about how do I just not sit my ass down and write, you know? But it's like you have to sit down. You know what I mean? You have to sit down. And when you do that, it comes up. So for me, it starts with an idea. It starts with something real. Like when we're talking about memoirs, I've written different, you know, I write lots of different things, music and memoir and, you know, nonfiction and fiction and screenplays and things of that nature. So depending on what it is, there's a little bit of a different approach. But it always starts with me staring at the computer, wondering why the hell why am I doing this to myself? It's torture. But no, with my nephews, with Nephew, it started with my nephew, just what happened to him and me feeling like I wanted to tell him something and me actually writing him something and realizing that what I was writing him wasn't gonna be just helpful for him. Yeah, so even though it's gonna be specific to him, in a way, this is a lot of people's story. You know, this is not like super unique, you know. The more you talk to people, I remember when I wrote my first memoir, Buck, I would see this lady every day. We would talk all the time at lunch and all this stuff. You know, this lady, we at my lunch break when I was, you know, teaching, I would go see her, or I would go to the place and I would see this lady. We would talk, just small talk, bust it up. And this was every day for years. And then I wrote Buck, and, you know, it was a very vulnerable book, memoir, where I talked about my brother's incarceration and things of that nature and other things. And the next time I saw her, she had read Buck. And she was like, you know, it resonated with me. You know, my son is doing life in prison. I see this lady every day. We never had a real conversation. You know what I mean? We never broke the surface of the superficial. And as soon as I was vulnerable enough to like share what's going on with me, my brother did like a few years, you know what I'm saying? Like you realize, like you think, oh, this person's not ready for my story. Then you tell them your little story and they come back with, you know what I mean? My whole family's doing life. You're like, oh shit. You know, so you really have to, you know, you gotta tell your story and you gotta share and whatever you think people aren't ready for, they probably are. They probably got something for you that you're not ready for. So that's one of the things that I've learned.
Pearl Clegg, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience for questions. Pearl Clegg said that when we were on tour one time, someone asked her, "What's the genre? What's the genre that's selling right now? What should we be writing about?" And she said, that thing that you're most afraid to write about or to talk about, that's what you need to be writing about, because someone out there is waiting to be set free by your story. Thoughts?
I mean, I say that sometimes, like almost literal, and I wonder where I got that from. Because, you know, sometimes you read quote, I'm like, okay, that's who I got that from. Because, you know, I've said that, and it resonates with me. I say, when I say that, when I talk about that, I say that's where the juice is. Because whatever, like right now, I tell you, this is real talk. Right now, there's an idea in my head. It scares me to death. But that's what I'm going to do next. But it does scare me. Every time I think about it, I'm like, no, I can't do that. It's this, you know, but that's where the juice is.
Right.
That's where the juice is, because the reason why I'm scared isn't because it's not an important story. I'm scared because I know that's where the juice is, and I know it'll push me as a writer, as a man, as a human. I know it will push me, and I know it will open up doors and pain and trauma and things that I may have to heal from. So I'm a little bit shook about it, but I know I have to do it. You know, it's like, it's every time, and that's what happened with all my projects. I'll hear that little voice, like, you know, and then at some point, you quoted Pericles. I'll quote Gwendolyn Brooks, who said, you know, it's not that you don't have fear, it's that you recognize that there is something greater than your own fear. And so I think that's what ultimately puts me over the hump when I'm having that situation, like with Nephew, for example, or anything. It's like, sure, I'm scared, but the purpose of doing this is greater than my own fear. So get over it.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you heal, you're healing so many other people right along with you. All right, so questions. All right. Okay. Oh, wait, so everyone can hear your question.
Hi, I'm a singer. And
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing? I just wondered, as it progressed, it became clear your nephew did want to know his father, but his father didn't want to know him because he's ashamed, or how come they never met even though they lived so close together?
That's a great question. So, and I talk about this all in the book through music, through conversations, you know, through the whole thing. But my nephew, when he was young, used to ask me about his pop all the time. You know, and I would make shit up. Like, I would say, like, oh, your pops is locked up. And he was locked up at different points, but not really to the point where he couldn't see him. I mean, he was out for more than he was locked up. So I would, when he was very young, tell him things like that, just so we, you know, because I felt like it was the truth. Like, he was locked up, but he wasn't, you know, but that's not the reason why you're not seeing him. Then as he got older, he was curious. Like I said, do you know my pop? You know, and it would just get, you know, I'd try to, you know, and we would, you know, constantly plead with my brother to, you know, be involved. And then my nephew did something that we call hopping off the porch. You know what hopping off the porch is? Hopping off the porch is like entering manhood, right? The idea is that you're on the porch. You're watching everything go by, right? All the OG people doing all types of stuff. You just on the porch, though, because you're a young buck. But one day, when you get off that porch, metaphorically, once you're off that porch, you out here now with everybody else, right? So once my nephew hopped off the porch and stepped into a sense of manhood, and when I say manhood, I mean there are father figures on the street, right? He has his uncle, of course, but I'm not on his block right outside the window. You know what I mean? So there's dudes right out there that are ready to take that role because they want to utilize him for something. They want to use him, right? And so when he jumped off the porch, he never asked me about his pop again. Didn't care about him. Like, just never said anything about him. And I would then later on have to kind of tell him things because I wanted him to know that the reason why it wasn't because of him and different things. I wanted him to also understand that his father was very smart and he comes from a legacy of people who are thinkers and all of this stuff. So I would tell him, but he really stopped caring. And even now, you know, like I said, they did connect, you know. And my brother's letter to my nephew, which is really beautiful, is in this book as well. His message to my nephew, but my nephew is not really interested, you know.
Gotcha.
I think it was a you know, in some senses it was too late, but that's what I love about life. Again, it's not
never too
over.
late.
You know,
Yeah.
who knows what, you know, they may be best friends, and you know, they may develop a different kind of relationship. But one thing that I wanted to underscore in this book is the importance of music and art to heal. Because my brother and my nephew had never met, but when they did meet, it was because of music. My brother heard my nephew's music, and that's what created that. So my brother never reached out for 18 years until he heard Nasir's music.
Right.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Hello, both of you. This is beautiful. This is so good.
Thank you.
For like sharing so openly.
Thank
One
you.
of the questions you answered is the vulnerability piece. Like when you're writing a memoir, you obviously had to be extremely vulnerable. Like you can't just run from stuff that may be painful. You just gotta deal with it. So that question's answered. But how did you, what's your process as far as research? You can be as short as you want to. And then the other question is, what about like permissions? Because you're putting out your people, they're your relatives, but still, what if they don't want to be in the book? Like, do you have to change names or?
Yeah,
How you
definitely.
do?
Definitely. So in terms of research, you know, I didn't grow up, when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet per se. Meaning, I think it came, I remember when the internet first came and somebody told me about it. I was like 12 or something. And this dude, he worked with my dad. He said, he's a professor now. Shout out to Zizwe Poe, Dr. Zizwe Poe. I'll never forget him. Because I never heard of the internet. It was not a thing to me.
Right.
So he was like, yo, man, you know about the internet? I'm like, oh, I don't know, what are you talking about? You know? He's like, when you go home, you got a computer? I'm like, yeah, we got a computer. He's like, all right, do this. And he wrote it out for me, like Google. Like, it was called a Google at the time. He's like, go to a Google. That's what it was called. And he's like, type in anything you want. So, but it would take so long. It would take like 20 minutes for stuff to load. And so I wasn't, you know, so now I feel like it's almost like cheating because there's so much, I mean, you could go through, I mean, there's libraries where you can access all the digital info. There's no excuse to not do research. It's crazy when I teach and, you know, get on my students sometimes, like, yo, it's easy to research this stuff. There's no way you should be, you know, coming in here with that. So I researched, you know, obviously, you know, doing a lot of stuff online and talking to people who were there or who, you know, I find the process to be very educational when I'm working on a project. I mentioned a project, Dr. Maya Angelou. So we made a movie called The Black Candle, which she narrated and we co-wrote and I directed. And it was about Kwanzaa, the holiday. And it really used that holiday as a way to celebrate the African-American experience and explore the African-American experience. But we looked at like the whole history. So like, it's a historic documentary. And I remember working on that and feeling by the end of it, like I had earned like not earned, but I had gone through a PhD program. I didn't get anything, I didn't get the PhD, but I felt like I talked to all of the people who were there. You know, I interviewed them for hours. I read all the books. I watched all the other videos. I, you know, spent so much time talking about that by the time you're finished, you're like, wow, and same is true for book projects. You know, I felt like when I finished this, I had gained I went to grad school for like my family and my mom and Bob and my brother and all of those people. And so, you know, research is a huge part of what I do. And then at the same time, like I said, making sure that I talk to people, because sometimes I'll remember something, but other people will remember it differently. So I like to talk to people and kind of see how they remember it as well. And then, as far as whenever you're doing a book, there's a process where you have to get all the legal permissions, and you have to find out who owns what and get lawyers and get signatures and all that stuff. So I know the way you just rolled your eyes, that's how I felt about it. But we've done it for all my projects, and it's, it's just something that has to be done. So thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. This is great.
Good
Way to
evening.
jump into Black History Month a little early. Want to ask about the family secret piece, and specifically.
I really should find that.
Right.
Without, and I know I can't wait to read it. Don't want you to spoil anything you don't want to share, but wondering about the family secret piece. Were there any instances of? I'm sorry. The secret not being told because a person didn't feel it was their secret to tell. I have had that experience within my own family, and it made sense to me. But I heard what you were saying about oftentimes if people know the reason, then maybe they weren't even judging you before, but when they know the reason, it brings context.
Absolutely.
But so my person, just quickly, my mother not telling my father what name was on his birth certificate, because it's not the name that's on his birth certificate. She said it was his mother's to tell. My mother wanted to get married. She had to have a birth certificate to marry my father. So not oversharing, but I found that to be curious. I wasn't expecting that, and I had great respect from my mother's respect for her mother-in-law, who did not want to tell my father that. So a lot of more than I meant to say, but can you speak on that?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you.
As well. Yeah, we all got some stuff going on. And I'm still looking for this one line.
I didn't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But I did wanted to respond to that, and I think the way that I like to look at it as a memoirist is, and before I answer the question, I shouted out my family. I also want to shout out former students that I have that I've seen here from Morgan State. I'm a professor at Morgan State. 1, 2, it's so good to see my former student. 3, I see some of my people in here, these faces that I'm very proud of, that I know I followed on social media. I know they're doing their thing in different fields and industries, and I just feel honored that I was a part. I had the opportunity to share whatever I was able to share with you, but they were wonderful students, and it's good to see them here. But as far as going back to the secrets, I guess I always felt like I have to tell it through my lens. That's the key. And is it a part of my story? Mm-hmm. That's the key. You know what I mean? I'm not just out here, just revealing secret. But if it's a part of my story, then I got to tell my story. And this just so happens to be kind of a part of it. So it is very difficult, I will say. My mom was incredibly... like I said, she passed away in 2021. I told you about how she was, motherfucker. So that's how she talked, She had a very high voice, beautiful voice. I haven't heard anyone with that voice. But so she was incredibly open about art. Like, she got it. So she would be like, encouraging me to to go there. Like, I was like, Mom, you want to reveal all this stuff about, because she talks about trying to commit suicide and attempts at suicide, her own, and pills and medication. I said, Mom, you sure you want to put all this in here? This is Random House, Mom. Once this is going to be out there,
Right.
She said, we have to do it because, she said, other people could benefit from it. She said, the Black community, they kind of mental health is a little taboo. So
Right.
she said, I want to, yes. So my mom was super helpful in shaping that and helping me with that, you know. And but it really is difficult, you know, because you don't want to be, you know, just telling people secrets, but at the same time, you know, you realize how beneficial this story could be for others. So it's a dilemma. It can be a dilemma, but I do think that as a memoirist, there has to be a level of sacrifice for the greater good. And, you know, that's the way you can think about it, you know, sacrifice for the greater good. Because, and like I said, if you show people your book before you publish it, then many people will want you to change, you know, things. And that wouldn't be true. You know, the key for me is, like, true to the work. Like, that's my first commitment, is to the work, you know. That's why I can't be taking all the, you know, hey, could you change it? I can't do that. I got to be true to the work, you know.
As we wind down now, you know, I thank you for your question as well, and it's the same thing I would say to, you know, to MK about, you know, secrets. And I didn't know that I had a different father than my siblings until I was 16, because I saw my birth certificate for the first time. But the why, after I understood the why, it was also very healing, because I knew I was a little different from them. You know, not that it's anything wrong, but I knew I operated. But it helped me get a sense of identity. And that's why I'm saying this book is so fascinating, such a gift to your nephew, because you gave him, whether or not you know the whole, you have given him a sense of self and who he is and why he does the things he does, the way he does the things he does. Before that, maybe he didn't know. And you're doing that for a lot. Well, it looks like you found it.
Okay,
so,
I'm
so I'll let you close with it. But before, we'll close with that. But I just want to thank you for your transparency. I want to thank you for all the healing that is taking place because you and your family opened up your lives to us. Thank you for letting the higher power use you to put these words together. MK Asante, I will let him finish with his passage.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the chapter Back in Blood, and it says, the tragedy of secrets is the blindness they perpetuate. When we keep them, we don't learn from our history, global, national, or familial. And we end up repeating avoidable mistakes and failing to learn the touch and texture of the extraordinary cloth from which we're cut. And here's a quote from my mom. My grandmother should have told me a story that would have freed me and her, and we would have flown to Jupiter and made believe that grandmothers and their children are something special, no matter what their color be. And if America don't know it, then Jupiter does. That's from my mom. Ina says, that's my mom, Ina. Ina says that everything, secrets, lies, and truths, come out in the wash. And in that our family, the wash is our letters. And in our family, letters can travel generations. So, there you go.
There's nothing more to add. Journal, y'all. Journal. All right. On that note, I will
we have books for everybody, right?
Yes, yes.
Pretty much. We have books for everybody. They're free. I'm gonna sign them over here.
Yes.
That's what we're doing?
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
yes. So please pick up your book. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mocha, for having me. You're amazing.
Beautiful soul.
Thank you so much. You're amazing.
All right.
Anything.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming. Go get your
Thanks.
book. And all right, heal, y'all. Heal. All right.